Welcome back to the Crypto Clown World podcast. I am your host with the honks, Jason Bruce. We're honking back in. It is the 14th of July, 2024, 7:27 on my clock, interestingly enough. So with that in mind, we will be taking off here with my illustrious co-host, Mr. Christopher Lundy. How are you today, sir?
Captain's log. What's today's date? Start date July 14th, 2024. We've encountered a bizarre species and we are coming to you live trying to identify it.
Yeah,
Stay tuned.
I think we're dealing with two bizarre species right now. We're dealing with the people who thought that you know something something could come of what just happened, and something couldn't. So uh, there was a really wild occurrence yesterday. We usually would do the podcast on Saturday. We've had a few things that have been postponing us to Sunday, and we had to postpone until Sunday. And if we would have done the podcast yesterday, we would have done it right before the big news hit, which was that uh, Donald Trump had an attempt on his life by a apparently deranged leftist, potential Scottish Rite Freemason Habsburg Jew descendant. Um, so, with all that said, uh, I wanted to get that out of the way because, as usual, Chris has a dearth of news and a lot to discuss, and we are not going to lead off his information with the Trump story, but we will come back to that at the end with some very pertinent information and a follow up to do a little bit more of a deep dive there. So I'm going to let Chris jump into the amazing information that he has for us as always, and I'll let you get going here, and we'll see what you got.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it, sir. Okay, so welcome to the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Top story for today is a follow up on Boeing. We've been covering Boeing consistently over the course of the last month or so. So Boeing has accepted a plea deal. Yeah, they accepted a plea deal, ladies and gentlemen, to avoid a criminal trial over the 737 MAX crashes. This is per the United States Department of Justice. Boeing is going to plead guilty to a criminal fraud charge stemming from two crashes of 737 MAX jetliners. They killed 346 people after the government determined the company violated an agreement that had protected it from prosecution for more than 3 years. Prosecutors accused the American aerospace giant of deceiving regulators who approved the airplane and pilot training requirements for it. The plea deal, which still must receive the approval of a federal judge to take effect, calls for Boeing to pay an additional $243.6 million fine. 346 dead, and they pay a fine and they get off scot free. This does not surprise me, but it does show that the military industrial complex, which Boeing is a part of, is essentially above the law at this point. And there are going to be some pretty significant problems going forward with Boeing. I don't anticipate that this is going to be the last time that we see Boeing hauled before Congress. And I don't think this is going to be the last time we see a Boeing plane fall out of the sky and kill lots of people. So, in terms of the deal being actually approved by a federal judge, the likelihood of that is questionable at this point because of the not just the malfeasance, but because of Boeing's sanction activity in terms of unapproved transfers of arms that certain nation states, specifically China, did not want to happen. So, on the one hand, Boeing's getting sanctioned by foreign adversaries, and on the other hand, they're being propped up but drained to a slightly less extreme degree. But if you can find a company $243.6 million and they don't go out of business and they don't have to go to jail and nobody gets prosecuted, then really the justice system is essentially two-tiered. So doesn't surprise me, but I expect public anger to rise over this and many other circumstances that are inevitably going to come Boeing's way. It's not the last you'll hear of them, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on. So we got a leaked email has exposed that the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, regularly surveils activists who oppose Israel's interest in the United States, according to a report by The Guardian, based upon a leaked email. And it reveals that the ADL had spied on a black organizer who opposed links between the U.S. police and the Israeli military. This is published on July the 8th. The activist in question is Tatiana Rebella, and she was subjected to years of secret surveillance by the ADL due to her work opposing international police exchange between the U.S. and Israel. Here's the leader. Occupy Palestine, Quds News Network is the publisher. The Anti-Defamation League regularly surveils activists who oppose Israel's interest in the United States, according to a report by The Guardian based on a leaked email. According to the Mail, which dates back to May 2020, the ADL has surveilled activists and, quote, regularly tracks profiles and sets threat assessments of individuals, close quote, it perceives as a problem. The email was sent from the ADL's head of security to Chief Executive Jonathan Greenblatt and unspecified employees of the pro-Israel organization. According to the report, the email proves that the ADL gathered information about Tatiana Rebella, a black activist who worked in a campaign called, quote, Deadly Exchange, close quote, against an ADL-backed program to send U.S. police officials for training with the Israeli military. And this email described as, quote, a radical with anti-Semitic and hateful views, close quote, but was, quote, not a threat, close quote, to the organization. Recommended her file to be referred to the organization's Center on Extremism, which tracks in its words, quote, extremist trends, ideologies, and groups across the ideological spectrum, close quote, according to the report. So, what's my take on this? Well, the ADL has also been caught spying on American citizens as long ago as the 1990s. And they've been sued for it. It's highly likely that this is going to lead to more legal action. There's already a pending case from Twitter X that Elon Musk filed against the ADL for, ironically, defamation. So things aren't really looking good for the ADL. They're getting a lot of bad press here, and this type of espionage is directed at somebody that simply wanted their police trained domestically in the United States rather than going to a foreign country to be trained. There's a reason why they're trained there, because if the training methods that Israeli trainers use towards U.S. police forces were done here in America, they would be unlawful. So that's essentially what's happening here, is that we've got more exposés coming, and the ramping up of the censorship is going to continue as a result, at least in the short term. Moving on. Interesting development out of the Middle East. Saudi Arabia has threatened the G7 against seizing frozen Russian assets, according to a report. And this is from the Cradle. So Riyadh has significantly boosted its economic ties with Moscow over recent years in spite of Western objections. And here's the leader. Saudi officials earlier this year privately issued a, quote, veiled threat, close quote, to G7 nations, saying that the kingdom could drop some European debt holdings if the Western Bloc decided to seize almost $300 billion in Russian frozen assets, according to informed sources who spoke with Bloomberg. Now, this warning, which explicitly mentioned that, quote, debt issued by the French Treasury, close quote, was reportedly sent earlier from the kingdom's finance ministry to some G7 counterparts. For the past several months, G7 nations had considered confiscating hundreds of billions of the Russian central bank's funds to funnel them to Ukraine. However, Bloomberg reports that the bloc, quote, eventually agreed to tap the profits, generated and leave the assets themselves alone, despite a U.S. and U.K. push for allies to consider bolder options, close quote. So the Saudi Foreign Ministry denied that any threats were made. They stated, and I quote, "Our relation with the G7 and others is of mutual respect, and we continue to discuss all issues that promote global growth and enhance the resilience of the international financial system." Close quote. Interesting. Well, what was my take on this one? Well, it's pretty clear that Saudi Arabia and Russia have at least a cordial relationship, but their aggressive actions towards Yemen speak to almost like this dual divided not loyalty, but shall we say friendship scenario. They have colluded with Israel and Qatar, as well as the UAE, uh, in the brutal 9-year long war of starvation and genocide and bombardment that targeted Yemen, and with US and Israeli backing. So it's very difficult to see how Saudi Arabia gets out of this cleanly, because on the one hand, they are putting some degree of protection forward to their, what I would say, at least is a new shadow vassal or something similar, with the Russians. But at the same time, they have they're trying to play both sides, right? And for me, this is not necessarily a diplomatic stroke of genius on the part of the Saudis, especially after they detained hundreds of Hajj pilgrims from Yemen, and were not going to return them to Yemen, and they were given a 3-day warning to return them, and they returned them. So Saudi Arabia has some issues that they need to deal with internally, and I expect that the only real thing that's going to move the needle in this context is going to be significant threats, especially military threats to their oil and gas, as well as their infrastructure. And if Yemen is targeted, there's going to be some problems. Moving on, big news out of the follow up to the COVID scam. So we've got this is published by the Times of India, and this was published on July 9th, and from their World Desk. So Pfizer's key scientist, Michael Dolston, who developed the so-called COVID vaccine, is stepping down. And this was announced on Tuesday of last week. So U.S. pharmaceutical giant Pfizer, and this is the leader, U.S. pharmaceutical giant Pfizer on Tuesday said its chief scientific officer, Michael Dolston, who's a key figure behind the creation of the COVID-19 vaccine, is stepping down after 15 years at the company. And the process is expected to last several months. And Mr. Dolston is originally from Sweden and studied medicine at Lund University, where he trained as a physician and later earned a PhD in tumor immunology in 1988. Interestingly, he's also on the advisory board of the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. And he's board member of Research America and several others. He's also been a subject of several different theses that he's part of a group of people that were essentially the masterminds of the whole COVID operation. So it's interesting that this is happening now, because we've got liability shields disappearing, because it's been found that the Pfizer vaccine is not a vaccine, it's a medical product that's been ruled on in I believe the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, if I remember correctly, Jason. I'll have to double check that. But that means that massive liabilities coming for these companies, and they're not going to last much longer. They're not going to exist. Pfizer is a relatively new company, and they started in the 21st century. Most people think that Pfizer's been around for a long time. They haven't. They've been around for less than 25 years. So just keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. These companies have boatloads of cash, and they have been around for very short spaces of time, which means that these aren't really companies. They're basically just fronts for NGOs or fronts for someone else's agenda. It's just the public face. If you want to know what a front company is, just look it up on your favorite search engine. Moving on, and we've got some interesting news out of the economy in the Levant in Israel. So, as I mentioned in previous shows, that I expected within 6 to 12 months that Israel's economy was going to face a catastrophic decline. It looks like that has happened, ladies and gentlemen. So 46,000 businesses have been forced to close since October 2023 in Israel, and it's estimated that up to 60,000 businesses will close by the end of this year, according to Israeli risk management firm Coface BDI. Here's the leader. 46,000 Israeli businesses have been forced to shut as a result of the ongoing war and its devastating effect on the economy. This was according to Hebrew newspaper Ma'ariv, reporting on July 10th, referring to Israel as a, quote, country in collapse, close quote. Moving on to the next paragraph here. Quote, this is a very high number that encompasses many sectors. About 77% of the businesses that have been closed since the beginning of the war. 77% of the businesses that have been closed since the beginning of the war, ladies and gentlemen, made up about 35,000 businesses, which are small businesses with up to 5 employees, and are the most vulnerable in the economy, close quote. Yoel Amir, CEO of Israeli information services and credit risk management firm Coface BDI, told Ma'ariv. The report also adds that, quote, the most vulnerable industries are the construction industry, and as a result, also the entire ecosystem that operates around it: ceramics, air conditioning, aluminum, basic building materials, and more. All of these were significantly damaged, close quote, according to the Coface BDI risk ratings. Now, we've already seen, I believe, it's either Moody's, Standard & Poor's, or both downgrade Israel's credit rating, so it's already more expensive for them to borrow. They've lost one of their ports to a bankruptcy proceeding in Eilat, and they've got businesses closing left and right without stopping for breath. And the article also goes on to state that Israel is in a situation where, quote, there is almost no foreign tourism, close quote, according to the report mentioned previously, adding that, quote, damage to businesses is all over the country and almost no sector has been spared, close quote, which includes the agricultural sector, based mostly in the south and the north, which are active combat zones right now. And if the agricultural sector is unable to maintain stability, that's going to massively impact the food supply domestically inside of Israel and in the occupied territories as well. So this is not going to be good for anybody on either side of that conflict. So we'll see how that continues to play out. But anytime economic decline happens in this particular manner, it reminds me of what's been happening in Ukraine in terms of the massive run-ups in public debt. So I'd be interested to see what the play is here, because we've already got a situation with Galilee wanting to secede from Israel and create the state of Galilee, but it does not appear that there are any takers for that outside of Israel to give them any degree of guarantee of safety. Moving on. And this is an infographic I found to be very interesting. And this is from the Macro Tourist. And it's a infographic on rate cuts. So, and this is the federal funds rate. And this is a chart that goes from 1980 to the present. So it covers roughly 44 years. And we see the interest rate go from 20% in the early 1980s and then careen all the way down to 2.5% at certain areas, but it was at zero from like 2009 all the way up until 2015 or 16, and stayed at zero again just before and for about roughly a year or so after the COVID event, and now it's back up to 5.5%. Every cycle since 1980 has had a lower Fed funds peak until now. So every debt cycle where there was a new peak, that peak was lower and lower and lower in terms of the interest rates, and now they're rising again. So what does that mean? Well, that means that you know we've got it's as shown, it's not bullish. So it will a coming Fed rate cut send everything surging. Some in the media believe that. Others believe it will do the opposite. The macro tourist is run by Kevin Weir, and he put out a piece a few weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. Why he thinks the first rate cut will not be as fantastic as investors would like to think. And he goes on to state that the private sector had taken advantage of the crazy low interest rates in the wake of the COVID event to fix the rate of their borrowings, whether it was homers locking in 30-year record low mortgage rates, whether or not those were fixed, I don't know, but I'm assuming they were, or corporate treasurers extending their maturities. The private sector became less sensitive to interest rate rises. But the government is a different story because they're supporting the largest debt to GDP level since World War II, higher interest rates creating unprecedented non-recessionary deficits. So what this means is that the government's deficit is the private sector's deficit. So all that money found its way back into the economy. So this is privatizing the gains and socializing the risk. And you all know what happens when that goes down, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to start loading up on precious metals, because privatizing the gains and socializing the risk is precisely what happened after the 2008 crash. So it's probably a good idea to start going risk on with your asset diversification strategies, especially as it results to hard assets.
And let me just jump in here real quick, Chris.
Yep.
I don't want to dumb it down too much for folks here, but in the technical analysis world, this is what we would call a trend reversal. Okay,
Yep.
you done hit a bottom. You popped up a little bit. You came back down to that bottom. You done popped up a little bit more now and created yourself a new high now. See that there 5.5%? That's what you call a new high after you had 5.25% before. So, what I would really think here, they may cut rates. It may come back down, 4%, 3%,
Yeah.
2.75%, something like that. And then they're going to jack
Mhm.
that shit up big time. And it's going to go back up and up and up. And you're going to see 15, 20, 30% again. Uh, like you were seeing in the 70s, because this actually doesn't show the full history here. It actually was higher than 20% at one point. So just
Yeah, it
throwing that
was.
out
Yeah.
there. Um,
Mhm.
this to me looks like a full-on trend reversal, and to think that they're going to get rates back down to zero, I think would be a fool's errand at this point. So if you see any pullback in rates whatsoever and you got a bad rate, look to refinance. If you haven't entered the housing market yet and you see a pullback in rates, don't hesitate to get in if you haven't yet, or if you're looking for other properties, because if there is any pullback in those interest rates, I would tend to think it would be very short-lived, and it might not even be favorable market conditions for most people to get in. So just be prepared, folks.
Yeah. And whenever you see this, I mean, in this particular context, a rate cut doesn't necessarily mean that your big blue chips, whether it's crypto or the stock market, Nvidia or Bitcoin, respectively, um, vice versa, other winners are going to find a second wind immediately, because these assets, interestingly, at least according to the macro tourist, are rising because of the higher interest rates, not in spite of them, which I think is questionable for crypto, not so much for Nvidia, but just want to put that out there. Moving on. So I've got a little chart of the world's biggest economies in 2075, which is just over 50 years from now. And this is according to Goldman Sachs's projection. And the top three are China at $57 trillion, India at $52.5 trillion, and the United States at $51.5 trillion.
India
It's very
superpower
yeah,
2070.
it's very interesting because Russia is $6.9 trillion, which is interesting, especially considering the fact that if the United States is in terminal decline, how is it going to regain all of that market share? You know, how's that going to happen? Well, perhaps some of these numbers are a bit overblown, but if we look at some emerging market economies, there's some interesting numbers here. We've got Nigeria at 13.1 trillion. And interestingly, Indonesia is fourth on the list at 13.7 trillion. Now, I've been stating that by the end of this decade, Indonesia is going to see about a 30 to 35% increase in GDP, according to an IMF estimates. So I would pay very close attention to Indonesia, ladies and gentlemen. It looks like it's going to be a country that benefits fairly massively from some of the geopolitical changes over the now and well into the future. But this research I find questionable, especially considering the demographic crisis that China has on its hands. It's not going to be able to maintain a high GDP economy if it loses half of its population as it's projected to because of its one China or one child policies. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. And another surprising entry in this list is Mexico's economic size is bigger than that of the UK. Actually, it's about the same size as the UK, $7.6 trillion. That's a big difference from 100 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. So, looks like there's going to be a little bit more of a reshuffling of the table as it relates to human relationships in this context. Oh man. So there's some interesting news out of Microsoft yet again. A couple of different pieces of news with Microsoft, but the FTC is now probing Microsoft's OpenAI investments, stating that the board seat termination is not going to resolve their concerns. And this is according to a Zero Hedge article posted on Wednesday, July 10th. And there have been a couple of updates to this article, so let's have a look at the leader. The mystery behind Microsoft's abrupt resignation from its OpenAI Observer board seat has been revealed. It appears that there was an investigation by the FTC underway. According to Zero Hedge's Twitter feed, US FTC is probing Microsoft's OpenAI investments. And Elon Musk even decided to chime in, stating that, quote, "We would have been weird having someone from both Apple and Microsoft as board observers," close quote. Well, there's a lot more in the story than meets the eye, obviously. We've already gone over how OpenAI got hacked in last week's show. So there are some details from the Financial Times which revealed that Microsoft has relinquished its board observer seat at OpenAI, while Apple is not expected to take one at all. Now, the big mystery is why Microsoft and Apple are suddenly trying to distance themselves from OpenAI. Could it be due to mounting antitrust investigations from Europe to the US? It's highly likely. So from FT, quote, Microsoft, which has invested $13 billion in the maker of the generative AI chatbot ChatGPT, said in a letter to OpenAI that its withdrawal from its board role would be, quote, effective immediately, close quote. Apple had also been expected to take an observer role on OpenAI's board as part of a deal to integrate ChatGPT into the iPhone maker's devices, but would not do so, according to a person with direct knowledge of the matter. You're hearing this correctly, ladies and gentlemen. Big Tech is looking to implement this espionage technology at the base layer of their tech, Microsoft and Apple. And they're pulling back because there is clear undue influence happening there, especially whenever OpenAI has gotten hacked and there hasn't been any reports on it and things of this nature. But moving on to another piece of the article that I found very important, and this was according to Microsoft accepting the observer board seat following the chaotic mess after chief executive Sam Altman was fired and then rehired days later at Microsoft's insistence. So there was a board shakeup. So there's undue influence on OpenAI's board by third parties, and this is what stakeholder capitalism looks like, ladies and gentlemen. Front companies on top of front companies. Okay. So know who you're dealing with. Moving on. And this is out of the Levant again, a little bit further east into the land of Jordan, the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. NATO is going to be establishing its first ever liaison office in the Middle East region in Amman, Jordan, amid conflicts roaring in the region from the Red Sea to Gaza, Lebanon, etc. Now, this decision has been adopted by allies in attendance of this year's NATO summit after being discussed last year, stating, quote, that it marks, quote, a significant milestone in the deep strategic partnership between Jordan and the alliance, close quote. So what does this mean? Well, it looks like NATO wants to establish a bridgehead in the Middle East because the United States is outmatched, and they're going to need more firepower if they want to continue their wars. How NATO is going to do that is questionable to me at this point, but the fact that they're doing this is going to make Jordan a target, and I think that's being done on purpose. But domestic pressure is picking up on Jordan. Yeah, but NATO knows that they're running out of time to get another bridgehead into that region of the world. But the degree of safety that they'll have in this context is questionable. So we'll see how that plays out. Moving on. Vladimir Putin has advocated for the creation of a parliament for BRICS countries, stating, and I quote, BRICS still does not have its own institutionalized parliamentary structure, but I believe that in the future this ideal will definitely be implemented. Receptiveness, justice, and equality are the principles that unite countries, close quote. Well, at least on its face, sounds nice. But why do you even need a parliament for these countries? Why not just have agreed upon, mediums of exchange? This is an attempt at centralization that is disconcerting and worrying. I will look at it with interest, but my thoughts on the matter aren't necessarily that it's meant to replace other things per se, or to be a counterweight. It's simply a placeholder where people can come to, essentially voice their concerns. The problem right now is that many BRICS countries, such as South Africa, are engaged in hot war against their neighbors as well. So a rising tide can lift boats, but whenever you have economic decline and civil strife, it's not good for economies in the short or long term. So these types of conflicts are very difficult to resolve, but economic improvements oftentimes do that. They will oftentimes de-escalate the situation. So I expect that Russia as well as China are going to utilize their soft power to stabilize those relationships, at least to the point of where they're beneficial. Whether or not they're practical and realistic is another matter. Moving on, we've got an interesting infographic here about Q3. I may have missed this in a couple of different areas, but Q3 tends to be the weakest seasonal period in Bitcoin, whereas Q4 tends to be the strongest. Bitcoin will have to endure supply distribution from bankruptcy estates this quarter, but Q4 is prone to offer strength stemming from the U.S. election, having effects coming into play, cash distributions from the FTX sale, and easing macro conditions. So if we look at this Bitcoin average 30-day volatility per month over the last decade, the month we're in right now, July, has an average volatility per month of that month of 3.5%. Whereas if you look at November, it's 4.3%, and December is 4.1%. Whereas August, September, and October, 2.9, 2.8, and 2.8% respectively. So third quarter historically has seen significant drawdowns before new money enters the market. And the average quarterly Bitcoin returns from 2017 until this year in Q4 were 54.19% versus 9.54% in Q3. So that means that Q3 is a good time to start looking at places to dollar cost average, places to maybe add some new investments, redistribute profits towards a different project or simply topping up on existing ones that you have inside of your portfolios. Moving on. This is an important story, ladies and gentlemen, about AT&T. So this is a very dubious headline. Hackers have stolen the records of nearly all AT&T cellular customers. A purportedly an unknown entity. The attacker has not yet been identified, which means, in my opinion, there is no attacker. But this is not just AT&T's customers, but everyone they interacted with. So this is another reason to be extraordinarily cautious with even basic communications, ladies and gentlemen. It's outside the scope of this podcast, but I do speak to this in other areas. So what I would say is that it's very important to do your research on quantum resistant encrypted communication, to stop using SMS and to stop using email. If you don't use their products, it's much more difficult for you to be caught up in these types of hacks and dragnets. All this information will be used against you. So think carefully about your communications going forward, ladies and gentlemen, because it's the SMS grid that's being used for the social credit system in places like China. Keep that in mind. Moving on, Jiangxi Bank of China has gone under. This is according to an article in the papers. And here's the leader. This is published on July 11th. So, Jiangxi Bank of China has gone under as the banking sector is currently facing a full scope crisis. It says full scape crisis, but I think it's read full scope. But with financial institutions being absorbed into larger enterprises, the Chinese banking sector is facing a full crisis, as in just the last week, 40 banks went under and have been absorbed into larger financial institutions. Jiangxi Bank of China also went under, further escalating the crisis. Now, in addition, China's smaller banks and financial institutions are currently struggling with bad loans and exposure to the ongoing poverty crisis. Poverty crisis in China. Looking at the GDP rates, just because you have a high GDP rate in your country doesn't mean that your people are making any money. It just means you have a lot of rich people that are, guiding things in the way they wish to. So what I would encourage people to look at, especially if they're thinking about their future or thinking about places to be or things of this nature, don't just look at GDP, look at values and look at, how much of the share of that GDP is actually held by people, and if people are actually able to own property. Because in China, you can't really own land. China has this policy where they own the land, but you have the property, which is interesting because they claim that you didn't create the land. Well, neither did the Chinese government, right? But they're behaving as if they do. And this is the end result of that hubris, ladies and gentlemen. Your economy falls apart. You can't, go with speculative, giddy nonsense and making crazy types of infrastructure malinvestment that leads to no actual economic output and expect to have a functional economy. So, how the truth shakes out on that will be interesting to follow up on. Back to the Levant. The Israeli Supreme Court has ordered mandatory conscription of Israeli Haredim, marking a historic move. So the ultra-Orthodox communities in Israel have vehemently opposed military enlistment and have also threatened, quote, unprecedented actions, close quote, forced to comply. Now, this development coincides with Israel's challenges in maintaining its vast military forces following the Gaza incursions. The Israeli government is pursuing an all-out war against Lebanon as we speak, despite warnings from the United States and other countries about the potential for regional and broader confrontations in the region. In fact, a member of parliament in Turkey today publicly called for a formal declaration of war against Israel, stating, and I quote, that the only way to deal with Israel is to use military force, close quote. So Israel's either real, actual, or purported adversaries, which is debatable, are turning up the rhetoric. But again, this is the rhetoric train. Until, when words don't match actions, that's how you know you're watching propaganda. If somebody says they're going to do something or calling for something and nothing happens, it's propaganda tactics. Just keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. And now we're getting into the meat of the soup, as they say, the Trump assassination attempt, which took place yesterday. The details for this are probably going to take years to unpack, ladies and gentlemen. This is not going to be an easy process to deal with, but start with a New York Post article about this, and this was a New York Post exclusive that was published yesterday. So, Thomas Matthew Crooks has been identified as the gunman who shot Trump during a rally in Bethel, Pennsylvania on July 13th. Here's the few excerpts from the article. Quote, the gunman who attempted to assassinate former President Donald Trump Saturday was identified as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, sources told the Post. Crooks of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, squeezed off shots, one of which grazed Trump in the ear at an outdoor rally in Butler, just outside Pittsburgh. Sources said Crooks was planted on a roof of a manufacturing plant more than 130 yards away from the stage at Butler Farm Showgrounds, close quote. This is interesting because how do you get that close? Secret Service protocol for any presidential speech is to have every rooftop covered in a half-mile radius. Half a mile is quite a bit more than 130 yards, ladies and gentlemen. Quite a bit more. So not only is this a security failure, it speaks to interplay. And some other details about this. There's a witness that twice tried to warn police before the attack and the attempt on Trump's life. A witness to the assassination attempt on from President Trump stated that he twice tried to warn a police officer about the shooter before the shots were fired. An unnamed campaign rally attendee that has not yet been identified by CBS News told that outlet that he was waiting for Trump when he noticed a suspicious figure on the roof. He said he alerted police to the suspect just before the shots were fired. And here's a quote from the eyewitness. Quote, I saw a guy on the roof of one of the buildings move from one building to another. So he was scaling the buildings to try to find the best vantage point. Interesting. That he had that much time to do it while visibly armed with a sniper rifle or something of this nature. Very interesting indeed. Continuing with the quote. And I went and told the officer that he was there, and I came back to tell the officer that if he walked up there, he could see him, but when I turned my back, shots rang out. The eyewitness explained. Another quote. I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear. I immediately realized that something was wrong. I heard a whistle, shots, and immediately felt the bullet tearing the skin. There was a lot of bleeding, and that's when I realized what was happening. This is a quote from Trump, and Trump wrote this on social media a few hours after the attack, which occurred at Butler, Pennsylvania, as previously mentioned. And testimony from Thomas Matthew Crooks' father, who the gun was purchased by, interestingly enough, pertaining to the attempted assassination of President Trump, has revealed that the shooter and his family are ethnic Jews of Scottish origin. And now, Thomas Matthew Crooks was born in September 2003, and he resided with his parents, Matthew and Mary, who are in their 50s. So that, which is interesting because, and very ironic, especially considering how, enthusiastically Trump has been cheerleading the genocide in Gaza that's being undertaken by the Israelis at this time, almost has his life ended by an ethnic Jew. It's very interesting. So why would someone in this particular context be targeting Trump when he's going in this particular way? Hard to say. Other details is that the shooter was featured in a 2022 BlackRock advertisement that was filmed at his high school. Very interesting indeed. And BlackRock has now since taken that ad down. What is my thesis on this? Well, BlackRock realizes that their Ukraine bet is going south, as I've mentioned in previous podcasts. And if Viktor Orban is to be believed in terms of his meetings with President Trump, former President Trump, that he's a, quote, man of peace that wants to end the war, if that's legitimately what's happening, which is possible, then BlackRock clearly needs to get him out of the way. But the fact that this happened 2 years ago proves that BlackRock knew of this young man's existence. And 2 years ago, he would have been 18 years old. So bad press for BlackRock. And something else is, and this is a Zero Hedge article, and this is the last talking point I have for the day in relation to the Trump assassination attempt, ladies and gentlemen. And there will be much more unpacking that I may do of this, but a couple more things to get through here with this last Zero Hedge article. So Biden has halted the Trump is Hitler ads after assassination attempts, and this is published today. Here's the leader. The scandal-plagued Biden administration has pulled all its ads against former President Donald Trump after he was nearly killed by a shooter on Saturday. Joe Biden is, quote, pausing all outbound communications and working to pull down our television ads as quickly as possible, close quote. Campaign official told the Wall Street Journal on Sunday morning. So this is going to raise lots of questions as to motive, who put the gun in this young man's hand, what are their connections to BlackRock, and what are their connections to Joe Biden, and who is behind the ads, who created them, who financed them. These are all going to be very closely scrutinized in the days ahead, I suspect. These are serious national security issues, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't matter what you think about presidential candidates. When people start getting shot at domestically in the United States, that's when things are really starting to teeter on a knife edge. But expect to hear some very interesting news about that in the coming days and weeks. From my perspective, this will not be the last attempt on his life. And Mr. Trump should, in my view, get more protection, as well as perhaps start wearing some body armor. This is looking rather brazen, to put it lightly. Those are all my talking points for today's show, Jason. So I'll hand it back over to you for QA and TA, respectively. Back to you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, we could play 20 questions here, or 109 questions, or 6 million questions, but that's
or 3 wishes like a genie.
right, exactly. We could unpack for hours here, and
Oh, yeah.
turn it into an episode that people will probably fall asleep trying to listen to. But there's a couple things that I just wanted to dovetail into the article that you just went over with the Biden halting the Trump is Hitler ads. And it's like there's all this subliminal stuff going on in the background. There's all these different layers of things that are affecting your psyche that people don't even realize. So, and I'm not even sure if this tweet is still up or not. At the time that I screen capped this, it had 6.2 million views on Twitter. Joe Biden on the 12th of June, or excuse me, the 12th of July, the day before this all went down, said, quote, I banned assault weapons once. When I'm reelected, I'm going to do it again. And it's very interesting that the day after a shooting went down, that potentially, from what the photographs are showing us and from what potentially may have been, either extreme luck or potential divine intervention, you can literally see the bullet whizzing by Trump's head as he turns his head. So was there something at play there? Maybe, maybe not. People can draw their own conclusions in terms of that, but the foreshadowing is insane. So not only did Biden say that on the 12th of July, but according to Politico.com, there was a quote from Biden stating, I have one job, and that's to beat Donald Trump. I'm absolutely certain I'm the best person to be able to do that. So we're done talking about the debate. It's time to put Trump in a bullseye, Biden said.
Yeah.
So I find that pretty telling.
Rather descriptive. Yeah, that's very telling indeed. So actually, I believe a member of Congress from Pennsylvania has called upon the Attorney General to press charges against Joe Biden for incitement to murder.
And, yeah, take those two posts into context, and then think about how things went down, and how there isn't some some reasoning behind that, but that's the condition that we have de-evolved to in this country, where you know there's three groups of people at this point, and it's people that are polarized by the right or the left, and then people who have realized the elections at this point are selections, and they don't really have anything to do with the best candidate. They have to do with the person that best gives the shadow establishment political power. So that's where we're at, and unfortunately, with the direction things seem to be going, and we have 4 months leading up to the election here, it's hard to think that things won't deteriorate further. So I would ask people to stop and perhaps listen to reason and say, if not a quick, but a very long and extended and heartfelt prayer for our country, because we're not in the best situation. So
we're not. We're on. 66% of Southern Republicans favor secession. So all that needs is a trigger mechanism. Back to the 1860s again.
Yeah,
so
and
be careful.
There are plenty of triggers to necessitate that, and we were discussing before the show, as we kind of warm up and kind of figure out where things are at before we jump in, that the plan all along has been to fracture the Union. So when you start to fracture people's belief in each other through politics, and you start to fracture people's morality and their sense of morality and everything else that goes along with it, and you see what happened yesterday, and you see how that divides people, and you see how it polarizes people and how it polarizes the entire situation. It's very, very easy for the people that are trying to manipulate things to gain more control. So I just really would hope that cooler heads would prevail, and that people would take a step back and try to process and understand this stuff before people really tell them what's going on. And we're just here to provide perspective as well. Please do your own research. Don't take everything that we say at face value. And if you're liking what we say here, I would ask you, if you've made it through the news portion of our podcast, make sure that you're liking this content, because Chris puts a lot of time and effort into what he does during the week to bring us all this stuff. So hit the like, make sure that you're subscribing to the channel too, and that you hit the bell for notifications, and that way you're notified when we put the podcasts out, be it Saturday or Sunday over the weekend. And you'll find pertinent information there, as well as some updates throughout the week if I'm able to put them out on the markets. So I think with all that said, that's probably about as much as I have right now to dovetail into everything without making it too exhaustive, as this is going to be a show that's going to run a little longer than others. So anything else from your end, Chris, before I jump into the TA here?
I'm good to go. Fire away, sir.
All right, my friend. Thanks as always. And let's see what we got here. Get a few things off the old desk, and we'll jump on over. Not to shill anything, folks, but a friend of mine in my Discord has been talking about this coin Rocky. I believe it may actually be in an accumulation zone for us here, so you can keep an eye out for that one. As always, nothing on this show should be construed as financial advice, but there may be a trend reversal there. If you're looking to pick up a meme coin that's a little lower market cap at about 13 million, this may be something that has a little bit of bells and whistles here, as we may be seeing like a breakout and a retest and then a little bit of sideways accumulation. A possible little bit of an Adam and Eve double bottom forming here on the 15 minutes. So this is a pretty new coin. Do your own research. It's a meme coin on Solana. I don't own this coin. Nothing that I'm saying here should be construed as financial advice. Get yourself a financial advisor. Do your own due diligence and research before jumping into any coin, investment, project, or trade. So with that in mind, that's a high risk pick. Right off the top of the bat at the show, you can check that out on your own time. I'm going to jump over into the ES1 S&P E-mini futures on the daily chart. And this did open up just a few hours ago with price action on the daily sitting up around 5,674. We did see a bit of a breakout here of this potential like pennant type of structure that I was possibly looking for. So there wasn't much in terms of the consolidation there. It broke pretty quickly and now is kind of retesting this level that I had mapped out at about 5620. So let's take a little closer look here, see how our 4-hour opened up. Is there some bearish divergence? Yes, there is. That's actually a really strong bearish divergence on the 4-hour. So I would want to heed that for the S&P. And if that plays out as like a double top there, you're looking at retesting this point of control. And there's looks like there's an inefficiency down here too. 54.50 area, 54.55. So that's something to keep an eye on the 4-hour here. You know, you might see a gap down to 54.40 over the next few weeks if there's a little further breakdown in the S&P. For right now, this is holding support above the 21 MA on the 4-hour, but if that does break down, your measured move would probably be pretty close to this point of control, which is 55.30 area. So it'd be an interesting haircut for the S&P if that happens. However, as we take a look here, we zoom in a little bit. Yeah, we had this bearish divergence. There's not really any bullish divergence that I would look at as holding us up here, but what may be forming is a bit of a cup and handle. So is it a double top or is it a cup and handle? Well, you're going to need to get a little further confirmation to figure that part out. And what we have here right now on the 15-minute, there is actually some hidden bullish divergence there that is holding the price up. So if we do like a local fib, the price action here is struggling with the golden pocket. All right, you sort of wicked up to this supply area, but not quite. All right, so there's quite a bit of volume still up here at about 56.85. So it is an area to look at. Maybe we'll still see a move up to that area and more rejection. But for right now, you're dealing with these divergences. The bearish divergence has played out, and it looks like this hidden bullish for right now is holding it up. So that's what we're keeping an eye out for. I will say the daily is getting awful extended at this point. You've got your stochastics pointing down. Now, given this larger set of peaks on the RSI, there is no bearish divergence there, but in terms of where this may close over the next day or two, you may see some divergence form here like that. If we can get the stochastics to bottom back out and the RSI stay, relatively within this range between about 80 and say about 68, then we may be looking at healthy consolidation. But for right now, on the daily, just the way this looks, you may have peaked out. You may have peaked out. And if that's the case, there is this inefficiency, this gap here once again, this 54.40 to about 54.50 level. For the S&P, let's see what type of a retracement that would constitute. Look at your 0.5 fib is right there. So that would constitute a bullish retracement in this market. I'm sure a lot of people would be panicking if the S&P were to take that little haircut. So what would that be here? From current price action down to the inefficiency at the 0.5 fib. You're talking about like a 3.78% pullback, so close to 4% potentially for the S&P. Now, if this holds here and you hold support, I would say above this level here, you can stay pretty bullish above 56.65. Below that, you're going to consolidate and you're going to retest these lows. You have support at 56.38. Any daily closure below that, I would look for this move to initiate. So that's my breakdown for the S&P futures. At least in terms of the downside, and then, you know, the next upside target that I had, if the uptrend is going to continue, is going to be around 5,900. And let's see here, maybe a little area in between that I just want to map out real quick. It's right around 57.60, 57.63, something like that. So that could be a stop along the way. You've got some more potential resistance, or an area where you may even top out around 58.50 around this 0.268 fib. So watch out for these areas for the S&P. I'm going to bounce over to Bitcoin. We'll jump into crypto. Let's get going with CME. Wow. Look at this gap that we just put in on the daily. And Bitcoin's price action right now does not care. It is popping off at 62,000 on CME right now after the open, which was at 60,985. So I was looking for this gap back down to potentially initiate when CME opened, and no. The bulls came in and said, we are going to absolutely rip this thing. So all I can say is be careful when you see this type of price action, because there's nothing saying that we can't wick back down with the open of markets tomorrow for Monday. So we usually see these false moves, right? So let's take a look at this on the 4-hour. Look at that gap. God, that's like Pamela Anderson on Baywatch in the 90s. The size of that gap is ridiculous. The top of the wick about 58,770, and this candle again opened up around like 60,880. So wild price action for the Bitcoin CME futures. And we'll see how the rest of the market's looking in terms of that. We did get a weekly closure as well. Let's look at the weekly close. Big weekly close on Bitstamp. All right. And I'm a little curious. I may bounce over to another chart here, because I was under the impression that we actually had a hidden bullish divergence that formed here with this closure, and now I'm not seeing that. So maybe the momentum in the price action sort of pushed us past that. Let me jump over to another chart. Let's check this Coinbase chart, as things are starting to initiate here with this sort of movement that I was looking for. All right. And we're also getting this bounce on the daily. This is pretty noteworthy right now, actually. Let me bring this to your attention before I bounce to the weekly, and I'm going to clean this chart up and we'll go over the weekly. So what you're seeing on the daily here absolutely is what we would be looking for if we're looking to initiate bullish price action. We had a bullish divergence has taken off. RSI is above the 50 level. Stochastics have crept into this overbought territory. You've got this huge green candle bouncing off not just the 21 MA, but also directly off the 200 MA on the daily. That was right around that like 59.3 area. So this is just such bullish price action. This is, three white soldiers candle pattern. Uh, this constitutes a reversal. All right. 9 out of 10 times, if not more, this is going to constitute a reversal in any market with the daily. So just keep that in mind right now when we're seeing this. This likely is a larger move being initiated. So let's clean some of this up real quick. So it looks like this head and shoulders is just about playing out. Yeah, this level, is pretty much taking you up to about 63,000, maybe a little bit higher. So let's get rid of some of this stuff. We'll take a little bit closer look at the weekly. And we'll see what the divergence on the weekly looks like on Coinbase. And now you can see how much stronger this is. And this is what I was looking for. And I don't know why Bitstamp isn't printing that. You can see how strong the hidden bullish is here, where you're swinging down this area in price action, that 40,000 to 48,000 range consolidation where the ETF came in. You're much higher on the RSI, much lower in price action, swinging down here with these tweezer bottoms just below the 50 level on the RSI. Nice bounce back above that. Stochastics pointing up, still here in this oversold territory, which you're still waiting for confirmation on this on the weekly, but this looks really good on the RSI. And if you're a betting man, you take this right now and you run with it with this tweezer bottom. And if this, this is a beautiful triangle here too. Look at this thing. Look at this massive ascending triangle that's forming for us. So you've got this huge triangle. Let's take this thing wick to wick. Where is this going to take us, folks? The measured move on that is about $103,000. $103,800. That is a big move if we break out of that thing. So, you could see us break out of this, come back up, test these highs. All right. And I believe, if I remember from seeing a heat map, there is big time liquidations right around 74K. So if we hit 74K, we're going to squeeze up. The next level I'd be looking for from there, I believe, is going to be a psychological level. And it's probably going to be around this area here, around $77,700. So I am looking at that as a psychological level. 75K could be one as well. We're going to get a squeeze up to that area, come back down and retest. So keep an eye out for that right now. Everything looks like it's playing out exactly like we would be looking for a bullish scenario on the weekly. All right. So if we dive back into our 4-hour, we bounced up here and we're bumping up against the 200 MA. So there's resistance at the 200 MA. This move may have played itself out at this point on the 4 hour for BTC. May need a little bit more consolidation in this range. I would like to see the price action honestly stay above 60K and above the 200 daily. So you've got your 200 daily at about 59.3. I'd like to see this stay bullish and flip the 200 MA on the 4 hour. And that's going to allow you a lot more bullish momentum. How much consolidation we'll need at this point, I'm not sure, because you can see we're getting pretty cooked on both the RSI and the stochastic. So let's zoom in here as we just made this move up as the show started in the last hour, peaked up here, and now we're seeing this kind of a wick off here at the top of this little flag. So I'm not seeing any like bearish divergence standing out here on the 1 hour. So that means we can have continuation potentially on the 1 hour with a short consolidation. However, I am seeing this bearish divergence on the 15-minute. So we're clearly going to need some consolidation on the shorter time frame in order for things to keep moving. Now, when you look at the 15, you've got your 200 MA and your 200 daily both tight at that 59.3 area. If you saw a retest of that, it would not, in my opinion, be unhealthy. Honestly, I really would prefer, however, to see this point of control hold that's just above 60K. And if you look at this as a double top type of a formation with that bearish divergence, that breakdown is going to take you, wick just below that, maybe 59.9. So watch out for that in terms of the current price action. Let's see if there's anything else jumping out at us. Futures on MEXC. I'm just doing some trading here. You can see this wicked up to that level I had scoped out there. I've been in a long. I posted that long to the Discord a few days ago. Got a skeptical gif or two thrown my way, and hey, I'm just here to do the dang thing on the charts, folks. And when I see what I see, I see what I see. I'm gonna post it up. If I think it's too high risk, I may not post it up. But if I'm seeing something, I'll post it up for you. And especially if I'm entering a trade, I'll post it up for you. All right. So right now we're in this little channel. These rising wedges, unfortunately, they're kind of built to break down. They'll break down about 68% of the time. If we go back to that previous wick, you look at where golden pocket might end up, you're right in this area, right around 60.2, and then this golden pocket, or excuse me, the point of control here at this 59.9 area, right around your 786 fib. So honestly, I would look for some retracement into that area over the next 24 to 48 hours, and a potential retest again of the 200 daily, maybe just below that at 59.3. Anything more bearish than that, and we're going to be looking at some sort of fake out or a bull trap scenario, possibly retest 50 to 52K. All right, 50 to 52K would be the breakdown level if we can't hold this area around 60K and the 200 daily moving average. Critical levels for BTC right now. Jumping over to the Bitcoin dominance, as I'm going to jump through things pretty quickly here. We're consolidating sideways, chop, daily RSI, chopping, just above the 50 level. Now you can see corresponding with just above the 21 MA on my Bollinger Bands. What's going to happen with this? I don't know. This is a sideways consolidation. It's 50-50. I've been talking about this box up here for what seems like maybe a year. I've had to move this thing sideways. Other analysts have talked about this potential like 58 to 60% level for dominance before alt season really starts. Are we going to see a little bit more of a capitulation for alts or a pump up for BTC in terms of dominance before alts really take over? I don't know. All I'm doing is looking at the charts, folks. I know nothing but the fact of my own ignorance. I'm just putting this stuff out here as a guide. Hopefully it will help you make better decisions in the market. As we swing over to US dollar tether dominance, we have seen this drop as Bitcoin has jumped above the $60,000 level for the first time in weeks. And here we are in this consolidative pattern for US dollar tether in what may be a falling wedge or a potential bull flag, possibly retesting the 200 daily moving average. This is a critical level as the price action is actually broken down from the 200 weekly after it pumped above it. So you can see here, you had your failed swing here, came back down, sort of what was, potential descending type of a triangle, right? If you were to look at it like that, you kind of lost that resistance level. So now you've broken down, and this is serving as resistance. So 5.3% is going to be resistance for US dollar tether dominance. I'd really like to see this come down further, retest this 200 daily, and bearishly retest in some manner and break down further. Let's see if our daily close can lend itself to that. Right now, you've dropped below the 21 MA on the daily, so that's bearish. You've lost the 50 level on the RSI, so that's bearish. Let's swing out just a little bit and see if we can see more signs of bearishness. On the 3-day, I like this a lot because it shows us not only would we have to retest this 200 daily moving average, but also this 21 MA, which is even lower at 4.86%. Your stochastics are just starting to curve down, so this breakdown actually may just be starting. And if we were to look at where this would have to come back to on the weekly, that will be down even further, like 4.6%. And this is just starting to curve down on the stochastics as well, potentially trying to lose 50 level on the RSI. Would really like to see the breakdown of this. See if there's any type of divergence. Let me jump back to the 3-day here. So this bearish divergence is still playing out on the daily, right? So that's the big one right now. Problem being, you do potentially have some sort of hidden bullish forming, so I would like to see this just break down. I need more breakdown. I need further breakdown. Right now, if we zoom in a little, it looks like this is trying to get a bounce. You got this long wick here. It's trying to get a bounce after Bitcoin just bounced. So again, as I just said, you've got this formation that had this bearish divergence. That divergence has to play out, and we have to see what I just discussed with Tether play out further to the downside. Let's jump over to total 3, take a look at our altcoins. Everybody hopefully has been hanging tough with their bags, with their altcoins, if not accumulating, at least holding on to your positions that you feel will serve you best in this upcoming bull run. This has been a great time to DCA if you were down. I did encourage people to do that on the last podcast. You can see there's still more of a measured move to go for this ascending triangle, this bullish pattern that's breaking above this point of control on the 4-hour after this consolidation here. So even though we are high on the RSI and the stochastics, I do like what I'm seeing here. Any drop back down, I would like to see a retest of this pattern and take back off this next area, which I have mapped out, $642 billion. Level above that around 674 billion. I believe there's a volume gap above that to about 750 billion. So I really would like to see that move initiate for our altcoin bags. Let's take a quick look at the daily and the weekly for the total 3. This is looking pretty strong. You've got RSI above 50 level, stochastics in a position of strength. Price action above the 21 MA. You're just below the 200 daily, so to see price action move up there and then come back down in some sort of consolidation, That wouldn't surprise me. And it just might make here a nice little pattern. Something like that. Or we could see that come back down, retest. Might not even have to be that low. You know, something in that area. But that would keep us pretty bullish. All right. So we'll keep an eye out for that on the daily. I'm going to jump over to Ethereum, the largest altcoin by market cap, as we look what it's doing versus BTC. It looks like it's actually holding up on the daily here, trying to create another higher low. After this higher low, we have seen some pretty nice consolidation, in this flag type of a pattern here, and potentially even maybe a bit of a head and shoulders going on in there as well. So if we see something like that, don't be surprised. But right now, this is a flag that I do believe is pretty bullish. I said when we saw this move here that this is likely the bullish move for Ethereum. So you're right now holding some pretty key support above the 200 daily moving average, which is starting to curve up just a little bit. Got to bounce off of that. The next key level is going to be this 200 weekly moving average. I apologize if I said 200 weekly a minute ago, but this blue line here, which is curving, that's 200 daily. And this is your 200 weekly up here, that white line. So if we take this measured move, if this head and shoulders is to play out, this is going to take you north of that line that's curving up as well. This level just above this one that I have mapped out at psychological level 0.06. All right. So that looks pretty good for the ETH BTC pair for right now on the daily. Let's see if the weekly is giving us any clues. Let me clean this up here. And you're just consolidating on the weekly above the 21 MA. I don't like the stochastic starting to point down. You are at least holding the 50 level on the RSI and trying to print a green candle after you printed a green candle last week. So let's hold on to this as bullish for right now. I'm not seeing anything that's saying that we have to break down. This just looks consolidative, and we're wicking off this 21 MA, holding above the 200 daily, and then again 200 weekly. That's the goal, 0.06 for ETH BTC. So we jump over to Ethereum versus the US dollar. This was kind of a goofy pattern. I guess you just have to call this a double bottom here, and it just kind of held support after breaking out. So we'll call it a double bottom. The measured move for that double bottom is actually right around the level of 3,336 for Ethereum. And this was a retracement, so let me get us an extension here. We'll go from that last wick before the breakdown. And you can see here right now we're running into the golden pocket, so don't be surprised if there's some resistance or retracement there. Majority of the volume is up here around 33.90, so that may take you just north of this measured move of this double bottom for Ethereum. So things looking pretty good there on the 4 hour. Keep in mind that's the Binance chart. Let's take a look real quick. ETH USD. I don't have all my MAs up here, but I just want to get a clean picture on the Ethereum weekly close. And this is bullish. So you're closing above this 200 daily. So you're well above the 200 weekly. You flip that back here on this wick down in terms of the 200 daily. So you've been pretty bullish for Ethereum for quite a while. Some people have been bearish. I'm not sure why. But, if you wanted to accumulate Ethereum at low levels, it actually bottomed before BTC did. It bottomed in June. 13th of June 2022. So Ethereum has actually been running uh, in what I would consider a bullish consolidation since $888 level. All right. And you had this breakout here. Attempted a retest, but the 200 daily and the 200 weekly held it up. And since then, you had a little bit of a contention with the 200 weekly and price action there, held this POC, and that volume held everything up. And since then, you've come back up to this area. So what do I see right now on the weekly? Well, you've got a pretty strong hidden bullish divergence kind of connecting those 3 points. And you can say, well, it doesn't connect perfectly, but really all that does is just create another drive, as some people would refer to it as, of hidden bullish divergence. So you have multiple drives of hidden bullish divergence there that are holding the price action up. The stochastics, this is actually trying to flip bullish. This hasn't fully flipped yet, but if we see the red line and the blue line both above this 20 level with the blue line above the red line, that's a bullish flip for the Stokes. And honestly, with this right here, this hidden bullish, okay, because you close slightly lower over here, slightly higher over here in price action with this tweezer bottom, but lower on the RSI here with this last close. So this tells me you take a shot at this 21 MA. Price action is going to move up from there. Now, do you stay in some sort of a flag for an extended period of time? Is this even something where you can consider this a descending triangle? Will we stay trapped sideways, then see a breakdown retest of this 200 weekly? Sure, maybe. All right, we're going to have to keep an eye on the flag, watch the divergences, watch the oscillators. But for right now, there is a hidden bullish on the weekly that has to play out after what essentially has been, 2 years of bullish price action and consolidation, where Ethereum looks like it's trying to get ready to create maybe some sort of an inverse head and shoulders or a cup and handle or something of that nature. Right? However you want to start looking at this, there's probably a few different ways to cut it up, but when you talk about what this measured move could actually be, and it may take time to play out, it may take quite a long time. You may have an extended run here. It could take a long time. You could be talking spring of 26. All right, you could be talking spring of 26 before Ethereum peaks just below $7,000, and that would be the end of altcoin season. All right, could even be a little higher than that if we want to extend that out. So those are some areas to look at. Let's get a fib on that too. Because why do anything other than look for as much confluence as possible? $6,000 area, very likely for a 1.618 extension. And if you make it halfway between that and the 2.618, you're looking at about 7,400. So, if we look what the previous move did in terms of the high, the extension for Ethereum went crazy. Okay? It went absolutely crazy. You topped out, just south of the 3.618 extension. All right. So even if you were to think that Ethereum would see diminished returns with this current extension, and keep in mind, I'm not actually even measuring this from the absolute high. I'm measuring this from the current high that we're at. So this could go higher. Let's extend that out. Oh, look, if you extend that out, the 1.618 goes directly to our measured move at $7,400. Amazing confluence. Amazing how that works. So even if you get a move up to the 2.618 this time instead of the 3.618, you could see a 5-digit Ethereum. All right? Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised. Will that take time to play out? Yes. I honestly think it would probably take at least 12 to 24 months to see anything even just like this to play out to the $6,000 to $7,000 range, and then we would have to assess if it can make the next move up to 11,000. All right. These assets are getting more mature. Their market caps are getting larger. So keep in mind it takes more money to move them. All right. If we see something play out to what happened in the previous run, if Ethereum is going to do like a fractal, or if history really repeats and doesn't just rhyme, maybe 15 grand. That's my absolute max bull case scenario for Ethereum this upcoming run. Most likely it'll land somewhere between 7,000 and 11,000 before we would see significant retracement, probably down to somewhere in these levels, $3,000 to $4,000. All right. So that's what I'm seeing macro for Ethereum. You're getting a lot here today, folks. I'm really feeling like jumping in, so just letting you know what I'm seeing right now. BNB gave us a nice breakout here, so a lot of the time this would be construed as a rising wedge, but more than likely this was some type of a double bottom. So if we look at this as a double bottom, if you were to measure that like that, or even like this, it's going to give you a pretty similar measured move. It's going to take you up to the area around $600. So BNB starting to move bullish, got a nice bounce off the 200 daily there. I won't go too far into this. Still holding my trade open on MEXC. Quite a bit of profit and looking for quite a bit more. Break out of this $600 level. You've got some resistance at 642. The next area of interest is around $774 for BNB. I'm going to jump over to Caspa. And what I'm looking at here for Caspa on the 1 hour looks pretty good, because you're seeing this consolidation here. It's been in this larger ascending triangle. I'm going to jump out here, zoom out a little bit more. You're still in this triangle. It looks really good. You got a nice bullish bounce. And as you zoom out a little bit more, pinch everything, you got this nice cup and handle that's still continuing to play out. So RSI above 50 level. Stochastics are starting to point back up. 4 hours looking pretty good for CAS. Still consolidating. And your measured move of this breakout is going to take you to somewhere around this area. Right around 20 cents for CAS. All right. So things looking pretty good there. Excuse me if you caught that on the mic. I apologize. I put this trade out yesterday in the Discord. If you're not in the Discord, you're going to need to get a hold of me privately for a link. All right, you can join my Telegram. I only post the podcast there at this time. Every once in a while, I may post some extra information there. But for right now, all the good stuff is in the Discord. You will need to ask me directly for an invite there. It is free, but I do vet people. I do not let just anyone in my Discord. I can't have chaos. I need to be able to control the environment. So with that said, I put this trade out right here before the break of the trend line, and now Pendle has made that move. If you bought Pendle at the $3.80 range, congratulations, you're now in good profit. I would honestly look for this to go much higher. You may see some consolidation in the short term. Honestly, it may even come back down here to these levels around that 380 where I put the trade out. However, I do expect much higher prices for Pendle into the $5 to $5.80 range, and much higher. This is a coin that has a very high TVL, total value locked, for the size of its market cap. And you can see here that it is breaking out of what looks to be a nice bull flag. So the larger move for this is going to take you up into these levels, $7 to $8, $9.50, $10. This thing can go much higher in the bull run, folks. Much higher. This can do an easy 10-20x from here. So take a look into this project. Do your own research. Keep in mind we're getting a little cooked on the 4-hour entry here. May not be advisable for Pendle, as I did put this out as a signal in the Discord yesterday. Congratulations if you took it. All right, moving on over to XRP. And XRP price action moving bullish here. We had some consolidation on the 15-minute. Looks like maybe a little bit of a head and shoulders formed here. And now you're getting the break out of that. All right. There's this pennant here. I like this pennant. The measured move is going to be around 55 cents. I do have a scalp open on this. I will likely take profit in that range. As we take a look here, if you look at your extension, that'll take you just north of the 786. So I'm going to be taking profits in between there in the golden pocket. I would like to see consolidation above the 200 daily for XRP. It was not able to flip that area. Currently, that moving average is pointing down just slightly at around the 54 cent mark, 54.35 cents for XRP. All right. Now, I'm going to jump over to a different chart, because what's happening with XRP, I want people to have a better understanding, as this thing looks to be making that move. All right. Now, this is the 5-day on Coinbase. This is not giving me the price history that I need. See if Bitstamp's got something for me. I've got some work here. So if you take a look at what's been going on, you had this consolidation, point of control, break above. Came back down, retested point of control perfectly. Printed hidden bullish divergence on the 5-day. This is a really nice signal, folks. The breakout of that measured move is going to take you above $1, and it's also going to take you up to the area above this larger trend line here. So this is an all-important area that we're coming up to right now for XRP. Any breakout and consolidation above this area, especially if you hold the 200 weekly moving average, which is pointing up just around 60 cents, it's going to be super bullish. I really honestly expect this thing to go much higher. If you're holding XRP and you've been patient, $5 is a very low side target. $8.50, $13 totally possible. Switch back over to the log here so this actually makes sense. This log scale measured move target for XRP I have around $84. All right. And what am I basing that on? I'm basing that on this. Just the measured move of this pattern here, this consolidative triangle. So, again, none of this stuff is written in stone. You could see this coin top out easily, right in this $5, $8, $13 range. I think $27 is another area that I had mapped out as... Let me see here if this was what I was looking at or not. would take you right up to around that area for the measured move for the cup and handle. So that's the fun stuff that I'm seeing here for XRP. So it's a very bullish candle, very, very nice bullish engulfing candle that just printed. A spot position in XRP right now is advisable, folks. It's advisable. And I'll show you another reason why. So we take a look at this XRP BTC chart. We may be seeing some consolidation after this breakout here, and there was a bit of a denial at the 200 daily moving average, but chances are we're going to be seeing, after potential consolidation, more of a move up here. So this daily is trying to consolidate in a way that I've seen before that could potentially break this thing back up. You're holding pretty nicely on the 4-hour for this BTC pair, with this hidden bullish divergence showing potential continuation. If you flip the 200 daily, this thing's going to go nuts versus BTC. Again, a position in XRP is advisable. All right. And yeah, we missed the bottom just south of 40 cents, at least in terms of advising this position. If you had been buying or dollar cost averaging in that area, kudos to you. I've been holding my bag pretty much, around that area for quite a while. Just been holding it, and holding it. So again, I do expect XRP to do something. Now, I was asked in the chat today about the AGIX FET ASI merger, which, there's been some interesting stuff going on there. So I guess if you're holding a Tangem wallet, they didn't support the crossover. My tokens were converted on MEXC over to fetch.ai. So I'm fine there. A couple of exchanges are still holding the AGIX token. So Gate.io and Poloniex apparently are still supporting that. Binance has something called AGIX USDT Premium. No idea what that is. Do your own research, folks. Again, I am not a financial advisor. Make sure that you're getting a financial advisor if you feel like you need one. Do your own due diligence and research before jumping into any coin project, investment, or trade. All right. So in terms of the, AGIX price right now, this is actually kind of nosediving and seeing some rejection at the 200 daily. 4 hours starting to curve down, so it's not actually the best look right now for the Singularity.net token. Should you convert this over right now? I'm thinking probably yeah, because where's the liquidity at? So Fetch is pumping, AGIX is dumping. Probably best to do a conversion if you can, if you still can do so, because this looks to be, making the moves that some of the rest of the coins are for Fetch. All right, so about $1.47 level for the next move up there. So that's about all the information that I can offer there in terms of like technical analysis. AGIX is dumping from what I'm seeing on the few exchanges that it's left on, and fetch.ai is pumping. So make that conversion if you haven't yet, if you still can. I believe Gate.io is still supporting the conversion for you. So that's probably going to be about it for the show, folks. This has been a long one. I know if you made it this far and you haven't for some reason on your way out, please honk the like button, get subscribed to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. It's so important to us here to make sure that you're supporting us in that manner. We are not currently asking for money for this information that we're putting out every week. There's a lot more information that both Chris and I put out during the week that is private. At some point, I may start charging for that information. People that have been grandfathered in may be offered a lower or discounted rate at that time. So, with that said, I am Jason Bruce. This has been the Crypto Clown World podcast. I know there's been some crazy stuff going on the last 24 hours. I hope everybody has given themselves some time to decompress. And if you haven't, I would suggest that you do, because sometimes stuff can be a little bit more of a burden than you realize, and it does catch up to you. So make sure that you are keeping your own health and well-being first and foremost above anything else, whether it be financial markets, news, and the health of your family and friends as well. So with that said, I'm going to get honking on out of here. This has been the Crypto Clown World podcast for the 14th of July, 2024. Take care, everyone. Much love. God bless. And we will talk to you soon.